All right, welcome back to the Black Mind Garden, where we are remapping minds and creating lives we design. Now, you might be wondering, this is the Black Mind Garden, and what is a white woman doing on the Black Mind Garden? Well, you guys know, if you know anything about the work that I do, if you've been following me, I do not only do I, train in neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis and rapid transformation, but I'm involved in activism and conscious anti-racism work with this here, Dr. Jill Wener, my partner. And I'm actually very excited to have her on because we're always having these really great conversations as partners who do this work together out in the world. We often have the depth of conversations in between ourselves as a white and a Black woman about certain things like what we're going to talk about today, like allyship, and what does that really mean, and what are the spectrum of thought around that. So I just wanted to have that conversation on loudspeaker, and because that's what we do at the Black Mind Guard. We put conversations that are usually behind closed doors on loudspeaker for the benefit of those out in the world who may not have the voice or have the opportunity to have these kind of conversations. So welcome, Dr. Jill Wener. Welcome, my partner, my sister in this work. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to have a place on this podcast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's overdue. And I think that it could be very impactful to have this conversation. So before we get started, I really would love for you to kind of let the audience know who you are and how you kind of got into this work.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because whenever I'm invited, I have a podcast as well called Conscious Anti-Racism, which and whenever I'm inviting people on it who don't know me, I'm like, I'm aware I haven't earned your trust. If you'd like to have a conversation, because I could just be any random white woman, and maybe I still will always be some random white woman, I don't deserve trust just for being me. Like I offer to have a conversation. So I'm Jill. I was a doctor for 10 years and got really burnt out about 10 years ago, learned to meditate, ended up leaving my this is like the shortest version ever, ended up leaving my medical practice to become a meditation teacher in that tradition. Along the way, learned some tapping, which is also called the emotional freedom technique. And along the way, also got called out for some of my blog posts being very privileged. And I was like coming from this like spiritual perspective, and I'm a doctor and I know all the things. And it was a huge wake up call for me. And I ended up, that was really started my journey. This was right after the 2016 election, where I began in earnest, really, really like taking a deep dive into privilege and whiteness and everything. And then at a retreat in early 2019 called the Allies in Action Retreat, led by Paige Ingram and Leslie Mack, we had a little thesis project we were supposed to do, and using our expertise and our spheres of influence. And as we were going through this workshop about the symptoms of white supremacy culture, an article written by Tima Okun, I was like, I can recognize all these. Like, this is just, and how do we recognize them? Defensiveness, perfectionism, sense of urgency. Well, I was like, well, how do we recognize them? That's mindfulness. That's mind body stuff. That's what I do. And so that was the birth of conscious anti-racism. In its first incarnation, its pre-incarnation was me thinking I was going to do something. And then I put something together that was vastly incomplete. And then I met you, and we paired our expertise and our lived experiences together, and the full breadth of the conscious anti-racism movement was born.
That was definitely the nutshell version. And I can say that because I know you very well. But yeah, thank you. I think it's a great background against which to have this conversation. And when we first met, I remember thinking to myself, people, white people say they're allies, but what does that really mean? Like, is this a white savior thing? Is this and it's an interesting thing because when I would watch movies, now this is a little bit like bigger picture. I would see these movies, and this is a particular movie I have in mind called Avatar. If you remember that movie, that digital CGI movie, it was a beautifully made movie. But one of the things that was glaring to me was that there's an indigenous, sort of tribe is, indigenous tribe, and there's this white guy who goes into the tribe and masks himself as one of them, and then somehow saves the entire tribe. And nobody else, like people, even my people were looking at me like, "What is wrong with you? Like, why are you? Can't you just enjoy the movie?" But I mean, for seriously. But I was like, no, this is what I see in all of the movies. Why does a white person have to be coming in and always being the savior? So of course, like that's the context from which, like when I first saw, I was like, oh, is this like a white savior thing? And then like having met you and really seeing the passion and how you actually created the course initially for white people to like, sort of up off their white tears kind of thing. I was like, oh, that's different. And so this whole concept of allyship is controversial because there are some people who believe, well, how can, like, what is this whole allyship thing? What does it mean to white people? What does it mean, and what is the spectrum of it? Can white people really, really be allies? What does it really look like to be an ally? So yeah, I guess that's sort of where we're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some people have objections to the word ally. They would rather hear accomplice or partner.
Right.
I've heard this one woman, she's a lawyer, a Black woman, and she sent me an article to post on my Facebook group. I'm forgetting her name. I'm so sorry. But she's like, there's no such thing as an ally because like white people created this problem. It's their problem to solve. It's not Black people's problem to solve. And it was such a good article. And it was just kind of flipped the whole allyship thing. Like, not we should be helping, but like we created the problem. Why are we not the ones solving it? We as white people. And so in her article, it was they. And so that's an interesting concept as well. And then I think also a lot of it's very performative and people just doing it. And that's how I was too. And I was for sure in the white savior complex in the past. I mean, I've done a couple medical missions to Haiti and to Africa. And, I didn't understand. And I understand now, and I learned some really hard lessons as I was doing that work. But it's so ingrained in our culture to be that way that it's really hard to step outside of it and see the bigger picture and then like not run away and then keep staying engaged. I think that's the thing is staying engaged when it hurts, when you're the one having to now be the one to make sacrifices and the one to let go, stop protecting things and let go of what feels very sacred.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing you use the word partner because allyship, linguistically speaking, it occurs like someone like, yeah, I'm for it, but maybe not like on the court, right? Ally, you can be an ally and be in the stands like cheering like, yay, go Black people. I'm for it, Black Lives Matter, right? Hey, posting on the Facebook, like that. You can be like you could call yourself, right, an ally. And so allyship sometimes occurs like that. It occurs like the corporations that put their statement on, we believe in Black Lives Matter, but what are they doing as partners? And so I love the word partnership because partnership implies that, we're in there doing the work together. Like you and I are partners in conscious anti-racism, and we go in together and do this work together and have equal stakes, right? In when I say stakes, I mean like we're both invested for a particular reason. And so I wonder, if there can be a shift in the language, because I think that allyship really is more passive than it is active.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of the problem is that it's like inertia and there's fear and there's conditioning, and when there's indoctrination in any way. I mean, we have, as you know, indoctrination with our medical training. That's like deep, it's super, super deep. Not just racial, but all kinds of indoctrination about what's good and what isn't good medicine, and all sorts of stuff. How do you recognize that that's happened and bust through it, like tear it down and then see what's left and go from there? And I think there has to be a willingness to do that. And then especially when it gets really hard,
Yeah. And I think from both sides, that's why partnership is, I think, even more powerful word, because, there is from our side, there's, what you said earlier, white people create this problem, it's their responsibility to solve it. And there's some from our side that's like, well, yeah, this is not our responsibility to teach white people how not to be racist. However, as you know, I'm of the mind that if things are so unconsciously ingrained that at the unconscious level, white people don't know what they're saying or doing, like there's now that's not to say they don't always know, because we all know that ain't true. But like the white people who are really trying to learn, who are really trying to grow, but still have this conditioning. So they'll say things like, we had an incident where we had to correct an article, because there was this sort of the way something was written that was unbalanced, and we were able to gently do that and it be accepted and changed, and it was great. So there needs to be some partnership from our side to be like, yeah, see, that's it. Because if it's a blind spot, then you're never going to see it, right? Just like in our personal lives, we all have blind spots that keep us stuck in a certain way. And so white people got blind spots. Yes, it was racism, which is what? I just called out a blind spot on a doc yesterday who was wanting to, this is a very interesting thing, who was inviting me to collaborate with him on a burnout initiative with a corporation, who then he revealed said that they didn't want to hire him because he was too white, he lacked diversity. So then he's like, first of all, you're the first person I thought of. I know you're doing this conscious anti-racism work. I want you to come in and maybe we do a diversity module. And I was like, first of all, when you, what you just said sounded like you were trying to make me your token Black girl. It's called tokenism, right? And so, he defended himself on that one. And so I know that's probably not your intention, but that's what you did. And then I said, just because if they said you, and I'm not even a part of his organization, I said, well, why is it that you didn't go to the rest of your crew, which you have diversity, instead of coming to the Black girl to, so yeah, it's our responsibility as Black people when things like this happen, especially when they're happening to us, to be able to be courageous enough to call it out, And I told her, I was like, look, I know it may have not been in your intention. I'm just calling it how I see it, and I'm going to give it to you straight. And we have that kind of relationship, because when you hear a white man said, and they didn't want me because I'm too white. I'm just too white. They said I'm just too white. And he's whining about it. That, it sort of takes everything in me to be like, will you stop that?
Right.
So we have to, as people of color, as Black people and people of color, be willing to listen for and be like, yeah, no, that thing right there, check that. And then, go learn about it. Go do some work on that, And here's our card, conscious anti-racism, if you want your whole organization to do some work on that.
Right. Can I add one little caveat to that?
Please.
That I'm sure you obviously are aware of, but I want to just make sure I'm naming this, is it's not always safe for Black people to do that.
Yeah.
So in a space where it's safe to.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know you know that, but I also just want to name that, because that's important, and it's not always safe.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like the relationship you have with this man is not always the case.
This is very true. And sometimes, so it has to be set, you want it to, it needs to be safe. And sometimes um, you have to, and this is a conversation we have in our community, what are you willing to stand for, to risk in a sense,
Yeah.
in order to make the shift? And of course, if you're, if your job in question and you have kids to feed, and there, it's an understandable where you have to be mindful. And at the same time, we look at, well, what happens if we don't speak up, and then this continues to happen to generation after generation after generation, right? Because the more we allow it to happen, the more it gets reinforced that they can get away, get away with it,
Yeah.
right? And it'll continue to happen. And so it's just like the doc, what's the doc's name? Where the congressman got fired. The sister's name, Latino sister's doc's name. Oh my gosh, I can't remember.
A doctor?
Yes, she was on a Zoom call, and
I don't know
I'm
the
gonna,
event.
yes, I'm gonna have to look it up and then get back with you on that one. But yeah, so we have to be able to be courageous enough to speak up at times when it may not be comfortable or may not feel safe, in order to make the bigger difference.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's I don't think I would ever say those words out loud. I don't think I have a place to say those things out loud. And I think you absolutely have a place to say those things out loud. You know what I mean? Like, if I said that, that would be very much short-sighted and ignoring lived experiences of people who don't live like me. But you have a different lived experience. So I like to name that also, you know?
Of course, of course. I'm trying to see if I can find that, the okay, I can't find it. So I'm like bringing myself back to presence here. So now, you know, as we talk about um, allyship versus partnership, what is that? What does the true partnership look like? What does that true partnership look like? If we really start to look at, okay, we're shifting our context of allyship from allyship to partnership. I think we just named the show, from allyship to partnership. What does that really look like?
Is that a hypothetical question, or is that a question you'd like me to answer?
It's a question that I would like you to
Start an answer.
start an answer for, and then we expound on that.
Okay. I just was like, I think it's probably about impact rather than intent, first off. So how do my behaviors land versus how do I want them to look or feel? I think it takes going really, really, really deep and scraping out every last bit, and then finding more, and then finding more of resistance, and of figuring out what we're protecting, we as white people, we in any position of power. So it could be a Black man talking to a Black woman, or a Black woman talking to a Black trans person, or it could be in any position of power. Like, what am I holding on to? But primarily, like, as the white, able-bodied, educated woman that I am, what am I clinging to? What makes it hurt? When am I like, ooh, that's too far for me, I can't let go of that, I'm afraid to fill in the blank? Being willing to let go of that in order to step up, to be a partner, I think that's a big part of it. Like, when the going gets tough, where are you?
Yeah. Um, I think on our side, what it looks like for us to be partnered with white people in this bigger fight of ending ending racism and inequality uh, is similar. Like, what are we willing to let go of? Because we have already let go of so much. Like, what are we willing to step into and be committed to um, in order to and courageously be vulnerable? Because I think it takes a level of vulnerability to step in this work with white people, right? It's not. It's about standing for us, but that if we're actually allowing for partnership, because it really is an allowance, right? There's a level of trust that has to happen that, as you said at the beginning of the show, is not a given, right? It's earned over time. Even, and I can even say this about our partnership, we first started and, it was like, okay, let's, forming the whole company together and we're getting married. And I was kind of like, wait, whoa, right? And that's how it is. There's a level of vulnerability that comes with that kind of partnership, allowing the vulnerability of that in when we've done that before, and then it's been used against us in some kind of way, or the rug's been pulled out from under us. So then, in order for us to allow for partnership, there has to be a level of willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's much more challenging than one might think. And I think that both there's levels of stepping into this work. It doesn't always have to be how we've stepped into it, which is basically the deep end. Yeah. And I think that it's important for white people and Black people to understand that, right? Because it's easy for a Black person to think, well, maybe I'm not doing enough, or maybe, I'm not, like the not enoughness comes out.
Yeah.
And I want that to be a squashed conversation, right? You step into this level of work at the comfort at which you can stand at any given time, right? That's what I say. And I personally, now sometimes I'm not, I say the things that people don't agree with. I personally feel like with white people who choose to be partners, sometimes you have to step in where you are. You start where you are, and then you keep moving forward from there. That's just from my perspective. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it can be, what's that model, the like unconsciously unconscious, unconsciously conscious, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a white person in there who has no idea what they don't know,
right,
and they just jump into the deep end, and then they're just saying all the things. And I've done that. I've been for sure guilty of that in different points. That can be really dangerous, and that just perpetuates the problem. So I think it's important for white folks who were like a lot of people are like, what should I do? What should I be saying on social media? I'm like, nothing. If you don't know what you need to say, then read and listen and stop talking and step back and listen and hear and understand and be quiet, which is not something that I do easily. And it's not something that a lot of people do easily. So I think that there has to be a level of education that is what's the word when you like motivate yourself to learn? Self-efficacy? I think it's self-efficacy.
Is it? Okay. Because I was going to say self-motivated.
Yeah, like learning because you want to learn, not because someone told you to read something or because you think and it sometimes starts as I'm supposed to read this book because that's what people said, but at some point it should become something that you want to understand about. And I do think for white people that we absolutely have to push past discomfort. And that's the basis kind of what you and I do. I think there's different standards for engaging here for people of different ethnic, racial backgrounds. White people we've been using comfort as an excuse for too long. And so we have to push past comfort like as a rule, like that's almost my guiding light, is if it's not making me uncomfortable, I'm not doing enough. And then giving white people the tools to do that, which is what we do. Because white people haven't had to build resilience around race, because we just haven't. And that makes us like sad and weak, like, and I'm nothing but, I am white. I'm not trashing all white people. It's the system that makes that happen.
Yeah.
But we have to learn these tools and these skills, and not just expect to have them, and not expect our Black friends, colleagues, partners, etc., to provide them for us, and or to have the patience for us, or to have to tolerate that. So white people need to do their own work, develop that resilience, develop those tools to get into that discomfort, so that we can do this work.
And I think, and that's so great, because one of the things that's meaningful that I say for myself is meaningful to me is when I see a white person like authentically doing the work and trying and giving up their social capital and calling out other people, like that is what makes, that's what earns trust, right? It's not, it's, of course, direct interaction with me, but it's what I see you doing out in the world. And that's, like for you and I, how that trust has been built over time. So I think that's what becomes meaningful to Black people, that has us be willing. And sometimes, like I said, we're not always going to be willing, and we don't need to be. But when we are, it's from the space of, okay, this dude or this woman is really trying, like really trying. Let me just help them out a little bit, right? But I think one of the really important things for us to do as Black people and people of color is to heal our traumas as well, is to be willing to look at how this has impacted us, how we have even internalized some of this culture. That in itself can be traumatic. And when we can look at that and forgive ourselves for having internalized some of this culture, or a lot of this culture, and then heal the impact of that, heal that trauma, and sort of recontextualize the learnings from that, then it gives us even more power, like groundedness, to be able to say, nah, this is defensiveness, white supremacy culture symptom, to be able to identify it, whether it's in us at the moment in a reaction, or whether it's someone you're speaking to, like, oh, this is not about me, this is that white supremacy culture, and disconnect it from the internal, this is me, they're reacting to me. No, they're reacting this way because it's white supremacy culture. Now let me call it out. Healing our own traumas gives us access to that, is what I feel.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, because it affects everybody, white supremacy culture. Like you can't avoid it. Mm-hmm. And it's all over the world. It's not just in the US, and it's not just with white people and Black people.
Right.
It's the culture of that oppresses people, and the oppressed people become oppressors. Mm-hmm. if they don't process that trauma. And I'm not talking about Black people in this setting, specifically. So yeah, trauma is huge. I feel like that's the basis of all of it. Is healing trauma.
It's healing trauma. And it is the culture of oppression.
Yeah.
That we're actually ending. This is one of those conversations that, sometimes people in a podcast, they want like the conversation to have resolution, but this is not a conversation that leaves resolution. It's a conversation to be continually opened.
Yeah.
And I just want to make, the reason I want to have this conversation with you, and then we may have future conversations, I think, just to continue to open the dialogue, is that we can never heal if we don't start to talk about it between the cultures, between the races, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm just saying that more for the audience than anything else. It's not a conversation that's just going to be resolved. It's a conversation to continually have. And with that, I think that it's an appropriate pause moment, because I think that the question now becomes, for me, and I'd love for you to leave like a final thought, but for me, it's like, the question is, when will we Like, how will we heal ourselves to begin to heal this global wound, right? To be able to impact this global wound. How do we truly create partnership? What's it gonna take? It's something to muse.
Yes.
What about you? Final thoughts?
I think I'd love to have a conversation about accountability. I think that's another big component of partnership. So like next time, what accountability looks like with oneself in a community across differences. I think that's hugely important as well.
Yeah.
We have to have that.
Yeah. And then the final thing I'll say too, just to kind of, I hear objections in my head. It's a systemic problem. Yes, it is a systemic problem. It is a globally systemic problem, but who's the system made up of? People, individual people. And if we can't do the work on an individual level, the systems will never change. And that is why we do the work we do with conscious anti-racism. That's why we have the book. That's why we have the course. That's why we train at the corporate level, like top down and bottom up. It's because we have to first start with the people. And when we start with the people, then we can begin to influence the systems. So tell them where they can find our book and our course and all that good stuff.
Oh, those little things. Our book is on Amazon. Just type in conscious anti-racism and you'll see a couple of sponsored ads and then a picture of a book with us, looking lovely on the cover. We have online courses that you can find at consciousanti-racism.com. And our course for healthcare is in the process of getting accredited for continuing medical education for doctors and nurses and many other allied health professionals. So sometimes to change the system, you have to work within the system. And we do corporate trainings as well, and for healthcare and corporate. And you can find those on the website as well, consciousanti-racism.com.
Awesome. So if you are in an organization that you know needs this work, go to the people who are higher up, let them know that you know some people. If you come across white people who are like, what can I do? Send them to the website to get the book, to sign up for the course. And if you have questions, you can reach out to us directly through consciousanti-racism.com. If you have questions, you can reach out to me and I can direct you in the direction of how you can get this work for your company, for your colleagues, for your friends, for yourself, even if you should so choose. Because sometimes we make the mistake of thinking, oh, Black people are not going to want to do this course, but guess what? They do.
And that's actually, we could maybe talk about this another time, but
yeah,
I think a lot of the Black folks who are at our trainings really get a lot. It's painful, and we can't mitigate that and support that, but there's a lot to learn for everybody because it talks about the culture
and how it impacts us as well. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for, just for being a partner in this work, first of all, for being willing to have this conversation. I know it was uncomfortable for me as well. Anytime, I don't care how much I do this work, and I tell people this all the time, the conversation still is a little uncomfortable, especially when you're not having it with another Black person. So thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and on this conversation with me. And all the information will be in the show notes, y'all. I want to say thank you to the audience. We know without the listeners, there is no podcast. And so go check out consciousanti-racism.com and we will see you on the next episode. Namaste, y'all.